Greetings, greetings, greetings. Oh, is this happening? Yeah. See, I say all the time, you don't want everybody to become an engineer. In society, the fashion consequences alone would be very troubling. So it's great to see you all. I didn't write this joke, but I really like it. So this was not intentional. So we, in your mind's head, French Revolution, we're executing people, cutting, when the machine, works very well, things that move cutting. But then the mechanism is stuck. The mechanism is stuck. It is a sign, you may go free. And so they let the guy go. And then it's a joke, everybody. So then we're cutting off some more heads. It's hilarious. We're cutting off, and then stuck again. You too may go free. And then the third, in the joke, the mechanism is stuck again. And the third guy, about to be executed, is an engineer. Oh, I see your problem. This self-awareness, if only we could teach that. So, hi everybody. Our story begins, do I push this thing? Sorry. Do I push this, something happens? Yes. So, it is every time you have I push this, nothing. Every time you have a birthday, you go around the sun, which is, I don't want to shock you, but 2 months ago, I met some people in Louisiana who really actually asked, does Bill Nye think the earth is round? Yeah, dude. And that's we laugh, but that's in the United States. So it really is a troubling thing that people are that unaware. So I was here in 1977, finished in the talent show with Audrey Moreland. She's a civil engineer. She's retired now, which seems like a great idea. But this was, dancing was very interesting to me. I took ballroom dancing for my physical education requirements, and it never really has gone away. It's still a thing. You may know I was on Dancing with the Stars. So look, I'm on the left, just to be clear. And these people are just such amazing athletes, this and that. Oh, by the way, when you're on Dancing with the Stars and you're going to have a full minute and a half on international television, just learn this. Just memorize those steps. It's a piece of cake. Anyway, I got injured, if you guys know this. And the guy said, I went to the sports medicine guy, and he said, if this is normal, your quadriceps tendon is 80% torn. I'd never heard of a quadriceps tendon. And I asked him, why did this happen? Why did I tear my quad? He says, you're old. And that's kind of the ha, 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 ha. Yeah, so it is a troubling fact. But then also as a young man, I was on the Ultimate team, and this was the first year of Ultimate. And I'm first to admit, everybody, Ultimate ain't much of a name for a sport. And I pitched Yakby, and we tried to have flat ball, but that didn't catch on. It's still the name, and I had such a good time playing, and I spent so much time that I'm invested in the Ultimate Frisbee League. And I know you're all this was exciting. The 150th anniversary of mechanical engineering. Oh my God, I got to be there for that. Well, this weekend is the start of the Ultimate Frisbee League. And so last summer was the 50th anniversary of the Ultimate team, and everybody wore number 73 because that was the first year we played. You can make fun of us, but it's the only team sport in which the offense cannot score unassisted. You have to throw to another player. And the young guys slacked off and let me throw a goal to Donnie Iveson. Yes, guy I played with 50 years ago, yes. Thank you, thanks for the applause. Anyway, it is a wonderful thing, and it's all about aerodynamics and all that stuff. So, 1977, for me, turned out to be a major year. First of all, when I started Cornell, I had this device. Anyone? Some of the young people, yes. Very nicely done, a slide rule, where you add and subtract logarithms. And if you ever see the old movies of the old rockets, and they start to take off, and then there's trouble, and they wiggle, and then they fall over, and it's because we had slide rules. And the English system. Is Dave Coy here? Is he here, Dave? My old professor, this is my aeronautics book I had with Dave Coy. And if you go in the back, they have answers to every other problem. In college, they give you some of the answers, man. Only some of them. Anyway, several of them are off in the third digit because the guy did it with slide rules. He just, that's close enough. And I'm sorry Dave's not here. This is Dave. This is the prototype of Dave, or what do you call the manuscript of Dave Coy's textbook. So when I was in school, there was no MATLAB, but there is in here. And for those of you who don't know, that's so funny. Wow. No MATLAB. That is comedy. Man, that's really something. So 1977 was a significant year, first of all. Understand, everybody. You all, I see a lot of students here. You're very smart. You had excellent school grades. You had excellent recommendations from your faculty, your parents, your hardworking people in your community, and thank you. I got into Cornell because of some sort of clerical error in the admissions department. And it's too late now, kids, so the people I went to school with were so smart. But anyway, that summer, after I was graduated, the 2 Voyager spacecraft were launched. And these spacecraft are so good. How good are they? They're so good. Last week, a few days ago, they got the memory on Voyager 1 working again. Kids, this thing's been flying for 50 years, and it's still working. That is, man, just think if a car could do that, you could get somewhere. So these spacecraft are still flying, and they're still tremendously influential, not only scientifically about the cosmos and learning more about where particles streaming off the sun finally stop because of the force of gravity. It's now in deep interstellar space. But also, it's, as you know, it's been inspirational. It's been subject of several science fiction movies, certainly a lot of books and art has been created on account of these things. And I was here. As a senior, I had completed my mechanical engineering requirements to great relief of everybody and the faculty. And so I took Astronomy 102 from this famous guy, Carl Sagan, that you referred to earlier. And he had this vision, he and his colleagues and his wife had this vision for this record that any alien could figure out. I mean, you just walk up to it. Obviously a star. Clearly, these are the binary representations of the oscillation of the hydrogen atom. And then you just add those up, and you can see that these are clearly depicting the time signals to various pulsars. I mean, obvi. And then you play it at 16.5 Earth RPM, and you hear these wonderful sounds of Earth if your atmosphere is well suited to listening to this. So people, I'm going to tell you, I was there. I was there in the spring of 1977, I was kidding, 1977. I see some of the young people. There were people alive in 1976, back in the 1900s. And Carl Sagan, I was not this guy, and you people might be some of these people who are so confident that they don't come to the lectures at the end of the class, end of the year, because they know they're going to do fine, they're going to take the prelim and everything's going to be great. Well, I showed up, all right? So Carl Sagan's up there. Well, we're going to put a rock and roll song. We're going to put a rock and roll song on the record. We're going to put Roll Over Beethoven by Chuck Berry. I am so old. Thank you. I saw Chuck Berry live in Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C., and I was among the people out of my chair jumping. No, a Roll Over Beethoven in comedy writing, we would call that a derivative bit. That's not the fundamental. What you want is Johnny Be Good. Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry, and sure enough, that's what's on the record. And then many years later, Carl Sagan gave him this commemorative medal. And Carl Sagan, at that time, was the president of the Planetary Society. Here's the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto. Pluto was considered a full planet back then. But now more research has been done. And it was also depicted in the plane of the solar system. You talk about astronomy comedy. Plane of the solar system. Kidding me. Anyway, so I take full credit for that. I look like nobody. That's why I went to engineering school, to get Johnny B. Good in the cosmos so that alien entities could enjoy some early rock and roll. But it's a message in a bottle. You know, the reason you sent this record out is to ask questions about yourself. And Sagan really was a deep thinker about all this. Meanwhile, you guys, industry came to campus, and in Carpenter Hall, I got a job from Boeing because I was very interested in control systems, and we had an eccentric professor who was really into hydraulics. And I just want the young people to notice it was $15,000, which was a lot. And let me emphasize, $15,000 a year, okay? You guys, you go to, I don't know what you do, College Town Bagels, you drop 15K. So we were all very happy about it. It was very cool. So I got a job at Boeing working on 747, which was the last plane of its kind. So nowadays, airplane hydraulic systems are run electronically, fly-by-wire, so-called. But 747 still had mechanical cables running out to valves on hydraulic actuators. And by the way, if you want, I don't know how into mechanical engineering hydraulics any of you are, but if you want to move this building about that far in a 20th of a second, a 747 rudder actuator will do it for you. Man, they're so powerful. Careful. Anyway, that was a cool job. I had a car, I had an apartment, this and that. I worked on Air Force One. A couple times there was a vibration. You're now called Director Erickson referred to it. There was a vibration that bothered especially this one pilot, this British guy. And it was the thing they give the young guy who can still do math. Yes. And you made it destructively interfere. You know, Quinky tube for you hydraulics buffs. But at the same time, a famous comedian, a guy who's now very famous, Steve Martin, had these records that were so popular. How popular were they? His first two albums, Let's Get Small, and Wild and Crazy Guy. They were so big that after these two albums came out, the whole world had a comedy club in a big city. New York has 3 or 4 of them. Toronto has a couple. All, in my opinion, which, as I hope you realize, is generally correct, had these comedy clubs open on account of the success. And Warner Brothers Records sponsored a Steve Martin lookalike contest. And so I won. In Seattle, I won, and it was, just so funny, because if it was, can I just say it was a Venn diagram at that competition. It was everybody else, and then in here was Bill. I dominated. I did not win the national one. The guy who went on to win the national one is from Nashville. He can play the banjo. I don't know if you know Steve Martin now presents a Grammy Award for the banjo. I was not in that league, but it changed my life. That's all. So I was working in engineering during the day. I would go home and take a nap and then go to comedy club. Because after I won this contest, people wanted me to be Steve Martin at a party or an event. And I'm not Steve Martin, and because he's really funny. But what do I have? That's right, I'm funny looking. Huge advantage. And so I started trying to do comedy, and I would take a nap, then I'd go to comedy clubs. I started submitting jokes to this Seattle television show called Almost Live. And Almost Live was hosted by a guy named Ross Schaefer. Some of you probably hired him. He does, how would you say, inspirational speaking. He did this analysis, speaking of parody. He did this analysis that all the big decisions are where your kids go to private school, what house you buy, what car you buy, what appliances you buy. All those decisions are generally made by women, and people do not market to women, or they didn't used to. And so he did very well. But this was my first bit as a science guy, and you can see I'm wearing a straight tie. It was so weird. But it was the household uses of liquid nitrogen, because we all have it around. And so you have the celery that's gone limp, and then it gets quite crisp. If you get the onion cold enough and hit it with a knife, it sounds like breaking glass. It's very satisfying. But the payoff is, I was a young guy. I moved to Seattle, didn't know anybody. I was a United Way big brother, and I was also a volunteer at the Pacific Science Center, which is still there. It was built for the World's Fair in 1962. 1962 was a long time ago. And the payoff, after the celery's good, the onion cracking glass thing is good, but the payoff's when you chew the frozen marshmallow and steam comes out of your nose. That is comedy. But at the same time, you guys, so this was a funny comedy bit, and Ross Schaefer, who's still a dear friend of mine, was in a writer's meeting, and he's got his briefcase. He was also the host of the most popular radio, what's called afternoon drive show in Seattle on KJR. KJR is a radio station that's so old. It's so old, it only has 3 call letters. KJR, it goes back. Anyway, he said, you could be Bill Nye, the science guy or something. Anyway, I got to go. And so that's the guy that coined the phrase, and I owe him my life. Anyway, at the same time, Mark made reference to the auto industry. Whoop, steady. And wait. There we go. I don't know why it worked on the 4th time, but I lived through this, you guys. And this was hugely, I'm serious, you all, this was hugely influential. For those of you who don't know, Chevy Vega had a steel block with an aluminum head. So the thermal difference in these two materials would warp, and then oil would go over the freaking place. This was done by this paint dipping thing, and the drip was such it always rusted in the wheel wells. And then the infamous, notorious thing, the older people may remember, when you rear-ended the Ford Pinto, it would explode. And that was, that's fine. I mean, exploding cars are fine. But the thing that was considered bad was the legal department had done this analysis that it would be cheaper, this is infamous rather, had done this analysis that it would be cheaper to pay the lawsuits than whatever would move the gas tank away from the exhaust pipe, which would have been, pick a number, a $2 change or something. And this almost drove Ford Motors out of business. And so you guys, this really bothered me as an engineer, that this was considered acceptable in the US. And then you may recall, I talked to a guy today. Does anybody remember degrees Rankine? Anyone? Some of the older people, yes. So for the young people, there used to be an absolute temperature scale in Fahrenheit, and it sucked. And this book, it could be about half as thick if it weren't for degrees Rankine. So I used this book so much. How much did you use this book? I wore it out. I wore her out. And I had to drill these holes because my last job, don't worry, everybody. If you're ever on a 747, I was very well supervised, okay? Everything, it's all cool. But my last job was on business jets, this avionics box, this black box. And I used this book so much because getting the heat out, this is before improving the circulation, the cooling system. Everything had to cool itself at high altitude if your cabin depressurizes. Oh, by the way, Bill predicts when they find Malaysia 370, Bill predicts, the airplane that disappeared in the Indian Ocean, Bill predicts that it's going to turn out the windshield blew out through bad maintenance, and then the pilots weren't in their seats. They couldn't get their oxygen mask on. They were screwing around talking to passengers. And then the avionics got cooked because the cooling system had failed. So Bill predicts. Stay tuned. Because cooling of avionics is this huge problem. So the U.S. abandoned teaching the metric system. The U.S. took solar panels off the roof of the White House. And then it was this haughty, the U.S. doesn't need to stay in touch. The U.S. doesn't need to advance even though they're making these horrible cars. And so that's when I decided to, dare I say it, change the world. And so through my colleagues, I started the Science Guy Show. This is the old postcard. That is me. It's just, God, it looks like Bill Nye, except he's so old. Yeah, the idea was to get young people excited about science so that we could solve these problems. And it really was the goal of the show. And so the show was aimed at people who are 10 years old, people in 4th grade, because we had this very compelling research that 10 years old is about as old as you can be to get the so-called lifelong passion for science. And I'll bet you if I talk to anybody in here, when did you want to work on rockets? When did you want to do granular flow? Where is he? Granular flow. These guys all got excited about it before they were 10. The learning studios, before people are 10 years old. And so that's why we did the show was intentionally aimed at that. And so just to refresh you, what am I doing with this thing? Is the battery going down? Yeah, like all my failures are mechanical failures. So we divided science into 3 categories. Life science would be general biology and human body. Physical science would be physics and chemistry. But the one that meant a lot to me was planetary science, which is astronomy, but also earth science. I don't know if you guys are into elementary education, but traditionally, earth science has been considered separate from astronomy or study of planets, the solar system, and so on. But that meant a lot to me because I was in charge. I was the head writer. So planetary science, I felt if we had this planetary perspective, then it would help, it would enable scientists of the future to address the big problem, which everybody could see coming even back then, which was climate change. Oh, there we go, climate change. So in a parallel story, some of you know this, my father was going to go to law school at Georgetown University in 1940. But for some reason, he didn't want to go to law school. You know, most people love law school. It's so much fun, relaxing. So he took this super fun summer job, what nowadays everybody would call a gap year, on Wake Island. You may not have ever heard of Wake Island. You go to Hawaii, and then you go about that far again. It's across the international date line. And it was a cool summer job in the spring of 1941, in the summer of 1941. But on December 8th in Wake Island, which is the same as December 7th in Pearl Harbor, they were bombed. He fought back for 2 weeks, and they were captured. He spent more time as a prisoner of war than anybody else from the U.S. And the Japanese military had confiscated all their jewelry, including their watches, and my father got fascinated with sundials. He wrote a book about sundials. If you're having trouble sleeping, it's fabulous. And then he developed this family project, the sand dial, so you could take you didn't have to take your watch to the beach. And we tried to sell them, you know, Dad, we're going to make dozens of dollars on this. It's going to be fabulous. But the sundial thing, I was a teenager. I'm rejecting it. I don't care about sundials. This is silly. You know, we have watches now. But it was somehow in me. And so when Dr. Jim Bell invited me to a meeting about Mars in Space Sciences building. I said, yes, let's go. So I went to this meeting about Mars. Whoa, what's happening? Steady. Yes. Oh, yeah. Is anybody a member of the North American Sundial Society? It is a party, man. It is crazy. It is off the hook. So I don't know if you can see this. They're looking at this big sundial. We are looking at this big sundial. And there's no shadow because it's a cloudy day. But cool, look at this, man. Somebody's laid this out. This is fantastic. And yes, I still subscribe to the North American Sundial Society compendium. It's a laugh riot. It's all, seriously, guys, it's all trigonometry. It's just trigonometry, trigonometry. Anyway, I got invited to this meeting about Mars. There it goes. It's out of my control. And it had this picture of the photometric calibration target for the cameras. So this picture was taken in a thermal vacuum box in a chamber. And the idea was they found out in 1976 when the when the Viking spacecraft, I was here when the Viking spacecraft landed on Mars, that they got the colors of the rocks wrong because they had calibrated the cameras on Earth. It got to Mars, and you'll still see in some of the very old literature stuff about over-pinking, where the rocks appeared too pink. So they had this idea, based on experience, to look at the shadow. And you may not have done this, but you can go outside. Today is a sunny day, which Dean Archer arranged. Thank you. And make a shadow on something white, like my shirt would work very well. And you'll see the shadow is gray. Thank you, Bill. But the shadow is also a little bit blue from the Earth's sky. So the sun is not the only source of light when you're here on the Earth's surface. The sky adds all this blue, and you'll see it in the shadow. And so I was in this meeting looking at this thing. You guys, we've got to make the photometric calibration target into a sundial. Come on. And yes, they're all looking at me like that. Yes. Bill, dude, it's the space program. We have computers. Billy, I see you're wearing a watch. No, it'll be cool. It'll be like guys who speak Klingon, except it'll be real. And so Steve Squires, who's now the head scientist at Blue Origin, was here. He got his PhD under Carl Sagan. He said, okay. And so there are now, there are now 4 Mars dials on Mars, on the Spirit, Opportunity rover, Curiosity, and Perseverance. And if you want to look at it, in the old days, in 2004, the post, which is called the gnomon on a sundial, had to be quite wide to get enough pixels in shadow. But then, by the time we got to Perseverance, you can see it's quite a bit more narrow. And there's some graphics on there that were designed by Mark Hilberto, who's our IT guy at the Planetary Society, and he lives in Toronto. Anyway, this is the one where you can see it. Can you see that's a little bit orange? So on Earth, that shadow is blue, but on Mars, it's quite orange. And so then the astronomers can subtract or account for the orange if you want to get a representation of what it would look like to us. So then part of the sundial thing, when I was in school here, this building did not exist. And when it was first built, it was called the Theory Center, where we would theorize about centers, I guess. But because of my dad and mom, I don't know if you guys noticed, my mom was one of the code girls. She was recruited to work on the Enigma code and then later the Japanese naval codes. And you would ask her, what did you do during the war? Can't talk about it. Can't talk about it. She never said anyway, but she was very good at puzzles. Anyway, for me, son of my parents, my eye goes right to it. What are you doing? It's a blank concrete circle. So my fellow alumni who contribute every year, rest assured there's somebody called the Cornell architect. And he explained to us that this is a Gwathmey seagull. This is a Gwathmey seagull. Would you grow up in a barn? It's a Gwathmey seagull. So he said, perhaps it's an ironic reference to timekeeping. What are you talking about? No, they just didn't put a clock there. What are you high? What the hell? What's going on? So David Scorton was the president back in the day, and he let me screw around with it took me about 13 years of negotiation, and now there is a clock there. And we all went out. Woo, thank you. We all went outside today to watch solar noon. Man, it was exciting. So what happens is, some of you may not have taken the time to think about this, but the sun and your watch don't agree because humans have taken the year and divided it into an even number of hours, minutes, and seconds. But the Earth's orbit is a little bit out around, and the Earth is tilted, and so they don't. Clock time and sun time on a sundial do not correspond unless you do something to make the adjustment. Well, when the sun is highest in the sky, this is called solar noon. A navigator at sea would call it when the sun culminates. And so what we have done with the help of Professor Scovere, did he go to work? There he is. Got the thing working again. So every day at solar noon, these doors open up in this super shiny duct, and that symbol is lit with sunlight. And so for those of you, for some reason, do not go by the clock every day at solar noon and look up, I recommend it. You can go to the website and see when solar noon is there. Oh God, this thing's, are somebody else doing the advancing? Yeah, oh, okay, no wonder. Yeah. It's just happening, man. It's crazy. So then, every afternoon, I would watch the original Star Trek I guess it was High Rise 5, North Campus. But often, we would come back later and watch The Tonight Show. And so in September of 1976, Carl Sagan was on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And he described this idea for a spacecraft that would be so big and so low mass. How big and low mass would it be? So big that sunlight would give it a push, and it could catch up with what was in those days called Comet. You guys may have grown up calling Halley's Comet, but it's now called Comet Halley, because they found people from the Halley family, and they say Halley. And so anyway, it got canceled in exchange for the handshake in space, where the United States and the Soviet Union would agree to work together in space. And that was great because that conflict has been completely resolved. It's no more trouble with US and Russia. Everything is great. But what happened was Carl Sagan, along with Bruce Murray, who was the head of the Jet Propulsion Lab at the time, and Lou Friedman, who's still around, he's a orbital mechanics guy, started the Planetary Society. And I got a letter in the mail in 1980. So I'm sorry, a letter was plant-based information storage. That's what it was. Very thin way to store information. You'll see, there's libraries, you'll see. Anyway, I joined the Planetary Society, and then Carl Sagan's kids watched the Science Guy show, so I was asked to be on the board of directors. I spoke at a memorial service, and then we gave, for reals, you guys, because he knew him, we gave Stephen Hawking the Cosmos Award, this thing. And he accepted it because he knew Carl Sagan. So we were in Cambridge in Britain, and these guys are all over here talking, and I'm over here having a beer or whatever at this pub. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, he was there, this and that. And they took a vote. And now I'm CEO of the Planetary Society. So just careful. So I've been CEO. Neil told me, well, Bill, do it for 2 years. It'll be good on your resume, be 2 years. That was 14 years ago. So can you advance it once?
If it works, I'm going to give this.
There we go, cool, yeah. So then I was on The Late Show with Colbert, getting on 5 years ago, and 7 years ago. And we managed to launch 2 light sail. They're much smaller, but it worked. And so it's all just part of how Cornell has affected me. The dancing, the sundial, the clock, the Mars dials, Cornell has changed my life. Cornell has made me who I am. So that's not all good, but a lot of it's good. And so I cannot thank Cornell enough for that mistake in the admissions department and then everything that's happened since then. So last Monday of this week, earlier this week, I was in Washington, D.C. for Earth Day on April 22nd. I was at Earth Day in 1970 because I grew up in the city of Washington. In the city, is anybody from Michigan? You know how you guys are doing? I grew up in Washington. Okay, you do this. Okay. And I rode my bicycle to the Washington Monument for Earth Day. It was amazing. Everybody was concerned about pollution. Well, now on Earth Day, everybody's concerned a little bit about pollution, but mostly about climate change. So since then, these documents have been discovered. This is from Exxon, before it was ExxonMobil, referring to a talk he did in July of '77 that he's presenting now in June of '78. And it includes the word view graphs. Anyone? Yeah. So for those of the young people who are looking at me blankly, the view graph looks like this. It's a human with a clear plastic thing, and the light would shine through it. And we liked it. Anyway, view graph 10 is here. Let's see, there we go, view graph 10. This was published in 1978, based on a study done in 1977. So this is the Earth's temperature from 1850 projected to 2050, projected by people working in 1977. The year I was graduated from Cornell. And the key word here is temperature. And you may notice it's going up. So people knew about climate change 40, 50 years ago. 50 years ago, people saw climate change coming. And I'm hip, young people, when you say, okay, boomer. What have you done? Almost nothing. And so it is going to be up to you guys, the young people here today, to, dare I say it, change the world. And so along that line, after I had a job at Boeing, my boss came to me. Things were going well. I'd solved this one problem on the yoke. The yoke was vibrating. Bill, we want you to come work on this new plane, the 767. Sounds cool. New plane. You guys, it was the first plug door, the thing that got in all this controversy the other day. Boy, seriously, peoples, the culture at Boeing has changed, man. When I was there, that kind of stuff, doors blowing off, wheels falling off, no. Something has changed, and they moved the headquarters from Seattle to Chicago, then they moved it from Chicago to Washington. Coincidence? You decide. So I said, well, when is 767 going to fly? Oh, 15 years. You're 23 years old, 15 years. Is that even a real number? Like, what is 15 years? So I took a job. You guys may not know this. I took a job working for a company in Seattle who made the premier oil slick skimming boat. The best, we sold them to the Coast Guard because the oil spills were happening all the time. And then we had this derivative thing to work in the oil field, the oil patch in Texas. I used to work in Victoria, the Texas Crossroads, and Refugio. Refugio is one of the towns that claims it's where Nolan Ryan was born. He's the pitcher. I don't know if it really is, because 5 or 6 towns claim him. Then Snyder, Texas, and Midland, Odessa. And all these brown dots are oil wells. And people who've never been there sort of don't realize the scale of it. And this is the mythic Permian Basin, this place that used to be a swamp. And it's all now tar and oil. And if you keep drilling holes, you keep bringing up oil. And it takes all this dinking around, petroleum engineering, to chase the oil to where the wells are. And it's, how to say, a dark art. But with that in mind, I was flying over the same area week before last. And oil's still going on. There's still oil in Midland, Texas. But now, it's wind and solar on the ridges. It's everywhere. Enormous expanses of wind and solar. And they can do it in Texas because they have all this, the Texans here, way to go, you have all this land. You can't do it everywhere, but that's happening right now. And this year, this quarter, Texas made more electricity from wind and solar than it did from oil and gas. And that's really something. But in order to manage this, in the coming years, it's going to take artificial intelligence. It's going to take the young people getting computers to manage moving electricity from one place to another when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining. And so also in 1977, when I was here, I had an eccentric, can I go with eccentric, professor for vibration and control systems, Richard Phelan, and Dick Phelan, woo! So Dick Phelan would start with this basic, and for those of you who don't recognize the PID controller, this is so funny. This is engineering hilarity right here. So PID, Dick Phelan pointed out that if you always have to have, this is the funny part, everybody. You have to have an integrator in the forward loop. You turn on the water, you stick your hand under the faucet, under the stream, and see if it's right, then you adjust. So that's integrator in the forward loop. And then, by long tradition that we were all brought up with, you have a differentiator in the feedback in the hopes of getting a jump on whatever's going on over here, on the aileron, on the nose wheel steering, on the oil well pressure. And so what happens if there's any vibration in the pump or any flutter in the aileron, this gets amplified, and then this thing is trying to integrate a signal that just differentiated. See how funny that is? Oh, boy, that's really good. So Dick Phelan said, no, let's have a second summing junction downstream on a different proportional constant. That is hilarious. And so along this line, right there, yes, great. Along this line, just to tell you who Dick Phelan was, he was the guy who designed the sundial on the quad here. So next time you walk by the sundial, Dick Phelan and Dale Corson designed this thing, and Dale Corson signed my diploma. And he came up earlier today. Dale Corson was the guy who designed the Arecibo Radio Observatory. He was a heck of a guy. So the sundial, I don't know if you've ever gone out there to adjust the date, accounts for the nonlinearity or the eccentricity of the Earth's orbit and the tilt of the Earth. Just like the solar noon clock, yes! This is one of his books, but in his second book, where he finally got to write his own book, now this is the Control Systems Comedy, The Apparent Justification for Past Use of Laplace Transforms. His book has, readers familiar with the textbooks will note the complete absence of any use of Laplace transforms. That is funny, let me tell you. It was a good way to keep students occupied in an intellectually stimulating way for quite a period of time. It establishes a jargon for the fraternity while effectively sophisticating, in the true dictionary definition of the word, a basically simple field of study into one that was awe-inspiring to the unknowing. And that is just, for those of you who applauded Richard Phelan, man, that was his thing all the time. And I just want to shout out to Brian Kirby, I have visited campus several times, man. I'm loving your vision of hands-on, learn to do it yourself instead of just taking our word for it. And so thank you. Anyway, Dick Phelan was an inspirational guy. Now, I understand this thing's only kind of working, my Kubo, my borehole observatory, but this is the future, you all. This, if we can harness the geothermal energy under North America, under everywhere, we can change the world. And it's going to take the mythic artificial intelligence to move. I imagine we're going to have a system, instead of just a pair of wells, we're going to have a bunch of wells just like they do in the oil field, and we're going to have to move, change the pressures and move them around very quickly. And that will take artificial intelligence. But this seems to me, as a guy who's been given a platform today, this seems to me really a solvable problem. Like, we are going to figure this out if we keep messing around with this. And so I'm excited about the future. And young peoples, you guys were alive when fusion worked. When I was in school, fusion was 40 years away. I was 40 years away. Next year is 40 years. Just stick with us. 40 more years, we're going to have fusion. This is where you're going to take something, neutrons, protons, smash them together, and the force that holds them apart would be overcome. They would fuse and release all this heat, and we'd capture the heat in the conventional engineering way using principles of heat transfer and make electricity by steam something or other. It's going to be cool. So the problem has been controlling this reaction, keeping it contained. And what is required, and what happened in Lawrence Livermore, is they have some lasers, and they buzz the thing, and in a few nanoseconds, or 100 nanoseconds, they were able to get out more energy than they put in. You were around for this. You were alive for this, man. It's happened twice. They pulled it off twice. And it's going to take artificial intelligence to control those lasers. That's probably, to me, probably not the way, as an expert on fusion that I am, I think it's going to be some other cool thing, like running protons into boron hydride gas, whatever that is, and making alpha particles, helium nuclei. And this is a huge problem that's being solved in Southern California by this company, TAE, using artificial intelligence, where they can get the magnetic field to change so quickly that they contain this thing running at trillions, not billions, trillions of degrees. These are particles shooting through a vacuum. So I just like to remind everybody, in the US Constitution, Article 1 is the role of Congress, the legislative branch. On Monday and Tuesday, the Planetary Society will have it. Is anybody here not a member of the Planetary Society? Really? That's so weird. You guys check us out at planetary.org. So about 100 people, sometimes 110 people, last time it was 105 people, come to Washington, D.C. These are normal civilian people who think space is cool, who think planetary exploration is worthy, don't want the Earth to get it with an asteroid, want to discover life on another world. They come to Washington, and I have been in, we got it, there we go. You know the problem, ma'am, is the gravity. It's just everywhere around here. It's always been here. I don't know why. Dean, what's with the gravity, man? And so I've been in dozens of congressional offices, senatorial offices, that are unaware of Section 8. Article 1, Section 8, what lawyers call Clause 8, refers to the progress of science. The word science is in the US Constitution. And many, many of our lawmakers have never noticed it. This is kind of the miscellany stuff about letters of marque, where you have your pirates on the high seas and who gets to keep the books and stuff. That's in there. And so is the post office. These guys are going to close the post office. We're not closing the post office. Come on. Anyway, the word science is right there. And these guys and whoever it was who influenced these guys in 86, when this was finally written, realized the value of science, realized the value of understanding the world around us and understanding our place in the cosmos. And to me, the phrase useful arts is 18th century speak for engineering, for using science to make stuff, bridges, church steeples, plows, whatever we were making in 1786. And that to me is just visionary and inspirational and kind of, if I may, astonishing. And so the word scientist was not coined until 1830 by a woman author, by the way. And so before that, if you were a scientist, you were a natural philosopher. But this to me is inspirational. And I feel that working together, you guys, we can use the progress of science, the engineering of stuff that moves, and we can, dare I say it, change the world. So thank you all very much. Thanks for listening. I'm counting on you. Oh, wow. Oh, gee whiz, you guys. Wow. Okay, young people, you've been doing this. The young people have been doing this the whole time. Hang on, there you go. Yes. Woo, Sibley School, 150th. It's great to see you. Thank you all. Go Big Red! Wow. Director.
Q&A.
Yes, Q&A. Yeah.
We got time for a couple of questions and answers.
Oh, yes. Oh, Q&A me.
So I know we.
What are you guys leaving? What do you have, jobs? Jeez.
We'll just do a few minutes here. So we got some in front here.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what's the latest with Light Sail?
Light Sail burned up, so everybody... No, it flew for 3 years. It flew longer than anybody thought it would. And for you moment of inertia buffs, even though it's very low mass, it's about as big as about 2/3 of the stage. We like to say as big as a boxing ring. We got it to twist so that it could build orbital energy. We proved that you could twist fast enough. You know, there's a very successful Japanese sail that flew 10 years ago, and it would take about a day to turn 5 degrees, which was fine in deep space, but when you get nearer, you want it to be able, nearer gravity, you want to be able to turn faster. So we're talking about the next thing. And is everybody excited about Friday the 13th, April 2029? Woo! Apophis is an asteroid that will come not closer than the moon. Any asteroid could do that. Closer than geosynchronous satellites. It'll graze the exosphere way out. And so it really is Friday the 13th, 2029. We're going to do something. We're going to do something, man. The 5-year plan. So join the plan. Did I mention the planetary site? Yes, take it. David, Dr. Erickson, yes.
Yes.
Woman with the microphone. Yes. Anyone?
Question.
Blue guy who's very played along. Thank you, sir.
I have a question. My question is, how do you think young people will solve global warming?
3 things. Excellent thing. Excellent question. 3 things I want you to do. So let me start with this hilarious bureaucratic joke or observation. Do you know the 17 SDGs? So these are Sustainable Development Goals. 17. Who can 17? How many people can do 17 state capitals? A few of you. A couple, yeah. So there's too many. So 3 things. Clean water, renewable electricity that's reliable, and access to the internet, or whatever you guys call the internet in the coming year. No, you may change the name to something like information something. Anyway, those 3 things. Clean water, renewable electricity, access to the internet. And that way we can do this mythic, giant, unbelievable goal, raise the standard of living of women and girls. When you raise the standard of living of women and girls, everybody is better off. Sure, yes. You know, gentlemen, you know the old saying, happy women and girls, happy life. Yes. And so we can do this. And the key is going to be limitless electricity. And that's why wind and solar is a start. I know there are people advocating for small nuclear. If you can sell it, okay. But I think it's going to be something extraordinary, and I'm excited. Did I mention fusion? So you guys all know NIMBY? Not in my backyard. Do you know banana? Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. And that's a problem you got to overcome. And people, that's why we have lawyers. I'm not kidding. And that's why we have venture capitalists. That's why we have people who do these, all these other non-engineering jobs, is there's huge problems that have to be solved to get electricity distributed to everyone. Back to you, David.
Okay. All right. Well, let's thank Bill.
Hold it.
again.
That's it?
No. I think you're still going to be here. We're going to give you a break first of all.
Give them a break from me. Yes.
No. So
Thank you.
we'll give Bill.